Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving into a really fascinating piece by Ali Mohammed Al-Shurafa. This article literally challenges a deeply rooted religious tradition, asking us to look way past inherited customs and jump straight into the foundational texts. It's basically a journey from passive repetition to active ethics, and it completely reframes how millions of people might view their spiritual obligations. Let's get right into it.
So here's a critical question we really need to ask ourselves right off the bat. Can repeating a single phrase guarantee your salvation on Judgment Day? Are inherited verbal habits actually enough to secure our spiritual future? The author tackles this head-on. He's addressing this widespread belief that simply saying, "Prayers be upon the prophet," hundreds of times a day works as a kind of spiritual get-out-of-jail-free card. But is that actually true?
To figure that out, we're going to break down his argument systematically. We'll start with the inherited concept of praying upon the prophet, then examine the reality of intercession on Judgment Day. After that, we'll explore the true meaning of the prayer of God and his angels, discuss how believers are actually supposed to pray upon the prophet, and finally, wrap up with the ultimate role of righteous deeds and applying the message.
Okay, Section 1, the inherited concept of praying upon the prophet, examining the cultural habit.
This really gets to the heart of the core conflict. You see, the traditional view, the one passed down through generations, basically suggests that verbal repetition guarantees the prophet's intercession and seamlessly erases sins. But Al-Shurafa challenges this big time. He asserts that some clerics have essentially sold an illusion of easy forgiveness through mere lip service. True salvation, according to his analysis, absolutely requires righteous deeds and the active everyday application of the Quranic message. You can't just talk the talk, you really have to walk the walk.
Which brings us to Section 2, the reality of intercession on Judgment Day, what the Quran actually says about it.
To prove his point, Al-Shurafa turns directly to the primary text to explore this harsh, unbending reality. He points out that this verse from Al-Baqarah unequivocally dismantles the idea of spiritual shortcuts. It explicitly states that no soul will suffice for another and no intercession will be accepted, meaning no one can step in to pull strings on your behalf. The author argues that the idea that anyone, even the prophet, can bypass an individual's personal accountability is a huge misconception. It's a stark reminder that every single person stands entirely on their own merit.
Instead of shortcuts, humanity is going to be judged on an exact, totally unyielding scale of their personal actions. The author uses this verse from Al-Zazala to show that the scale measures an atom's weight of actual good or evil deeds. Think about that for a second. An atom's weight. It does not measure an accumulation of repeated phrases. Righteous action is literally the only currency accepted on this scale.
Because of this exact scale, the author warns of a truly tragic surprise on Judgment Day. Just imagine standing there thinking you're incredibly wealthy in faith just because you muttered a phrase millions of times, only to be told your account is completely empty. If those words weren't backed by actual ethical behavior, like if you neglected justice, mercy, and charity, well, your spiritual bank account is simply overdrawn.
All right, moving right along to Section 3, the meaning of the prayer of God and his angels, redefining the types of prayer in the Quran.
So what's really fascinating here is how the word prayer actually changes meaning depending on who's doing it. It's like a matrix of relationships. When God and the angels pray upon the prophet, it means elevation, support, and protection for his mission. When a prophet prays upon the believers, like those who give to charity, it's a supplication for their blessing and compensation. But here's the kicker. When believers are commanded to pray upon the prophet, it definitely doesn't mean just sending words up into the sky. It implies a distinct active relationship, obeying his message and actively following the Quran.
According to the text, this is the true definition. It is an action-oriented command. To genuinely pray upon the prophet is to uphold justice, practice mercy, and spread goodness. It's an active commitment to implement the ethics of the Quran into your daily life. It takes the whole concept out of the realm of passive repetition and drops it right into the middle of how we treat our neighbors, how we conduct our business, and how we actually live our lives every single day.
Let's look at Section 4. How do believers pray upon the prophet? Moving from words to actions.
If we're moving away from just words, how exactly does the author say believers should practice this? Like, what does it look like on a random Tuesday afternoon? Well, Al-Shurafa outlines some highly specific, practical steps. First, there has to be genuine belief and submission to the message. Next is where it gets pretty tough. You have to completely abstain from forbidden acts. That means no aggression, no gossip, no injustice, and absolutely no exploiting others. Finally, the proactive part. You must actively practice mercy and justice, ensuring the good treatment of all people, no matter who they are. He emphasizes that a true connection to the Prophet is demonstrated strictly through ethical, real-world behavior.
To really hammer this point home, Al-Shurafa points to a specific verse from Ali Imran. It shows that the Prophet directed people to follow his message in order to gain God's love. He wasn't asking them to seek a personal attachment to him just to find loopholes in the rules. Following the Prophet means following the heavy, demanding, and incredibly beautiful ethical framework he delivered, not just praising the messenger while totally ignoring his message.
And that brings us to Section 5, Righteous Deeds and Applying the Message, the Ultimate Criteria for Salvation.
This is the final critical argument of the analysis, and the stakes are honestly incredibly high. The author argues that the consequences of getting this wrong aren't just a theological error, they're a societal disaster. By replacing active duties with passive habits, people develop a completely false sense of security regarding their sins. Abandoning the active application of the message has led to a society that loudly repeats religious phrases with their tongues, but practices cruelty, injustice, and even bloodshed with their hands. It fundamentally ignores the Prophet's core mission as a warner and a guide for ethical living, basically replacing a transformative framework with an empty ritual.
Ultimately, it always comes back to personal responsibility. Just look at this verse. Every soul for what it has earned will be retained. Notice that specific word, earned. You don't earn through simple repetition. You earn through effort, through righteous deeds, through making the really hard choices to be kind when it's super easy to be cruel, and to be just when it's easy to be corrupt. And that brings us to the end of our analysis. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought from today's explainer to reflect on. Ask yourself, is faith built on inherited verbal habits, or is it built on the active, ethical implementation of the Prophet's message? True devotion requires action, not just words. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I really hope it sparked some curiosity about the texts behind our traditions. See you next time.
مؤسسة رسالة السلام العالمية، رسالة إنسانية لعالم أكثر سلاماً.